We've already talked about the Cyclones losing one quarterback, but two? Two? Today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making this your first listen every single day, and shout out to you guys that are here every day. You make the world go around, and I couldn't appreciate you enough. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening, whether it be on podcast or YouTube, so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, let's go ahead and dive right into the potential situation Iowa State football may be facing. Okay, Iowa State football may be coming off of their first 10-win season in the history of the program. 133 years in the making. It's been a long journey, but we are here. I've talked a lot, honestly, about how much I do think that this season has cemented Iowa State into that category of real football programs. We've spent so many years being considered a bit of a fraud almost, not really being looked at in a serious light. And I do think that this season has been a bit of a headliner for the Cyclones. It's turned a lot of heads. Granted, we did kind of get beat down in the Big 12 championship. I'm not going to ignore that. But I will say just everything else, obviously making the Big 12 championship, the journey to get there, beating Iowa in the CyHawk game in week 2, everything that happened along the way, the Cyclones fighting back into it in their last 3 games was electric. Okay, I think people finally turned some heads towards Cyclones' way, especially after our 7-0 start. All of that headlined by our starting quarterback, Rocco Becht. Now, you're probably wondering, what are you talking about? You have danced around this little point of, we're going to lose a second quarterback. Who are you talking about? Well, that's why I bring up Rocco Becht. Rocco Becht is now potentially in danger of leaving the Cyclones program. And this is, I haven't seen any official reports, but to say that anything else might be the case would be almost negligent. Let's break it down. West Virginia, moving on from Neil Brown. West Virginia in the Big 12 Conference. So certainly an interesting situation, obviously, on that front. But also, if you know the name Rocco Becht, or if you know much about names, Rocco Becht, Becht is his last name. Anthony Becht is his father. Becht, same last name. Look at that. Crazy how that works. Anthony Becht played tight end for West Virginia. I've got some stats here. Played from 90, I've seen 5 and 6. I don't know who's using what numbers. 96 to 99 is the numbers I'm going to use. In that time, garnered a total of 83 receptions, 1,178 yards, and 11 touchdowns. He was drafted 27th overall to the New York Jets, and in an 11-year career also played for St. Louis with the Rams, Kansas City, Tampa Bay, and Arizona. Obviously, the Chiefs, Buccaneers, and Cardinals in those last 3 there. Now, he was just inducted this year into the WVU Hall of Fame, whatever they got going on over there, in the Iowa State WVU game. Remember, that was a big game for the Cyclones. Everybody thought that this was the game that the Cyclones would trip up in. West Virginia's doing their cold night, the blackout deal. It's going to be electric over there. It's a hard place to play, Morgantown, especially at night. This is where the Cyclones trip up. No, that's not what happened, and that's an even bigger, advocate to that point I was making about heads being turned towards the Cyclones this year. No, Rocco Becht stepped up. The Cyclones won that game. That is neither here nor there, and really has absolutely nothing to do with the fact of what we're talking about. But nonetheless, Anthony Becht, Rocco's father, was commended that game. He was, I don't know if it was during a timeout, but he was taken out to the field, and they gave, this is what he's done for us, and they put him up on the big screen, and they gave a big hearty clap for the guy. And all kudos to him. I could never do the same. I'm way too small. I could never be a tight end. Where things get interesting, though, is when you take that point, Anthony Becht having strong ties to the University of West Virginia, that, obviously in co I guess existence with West Virginia looking for a quarterback, draws the question, could they potentially look at Anthony Becht? Well, it was reported by none other than the one and only Adam Schefter that Anthony Becht did in fact interview for that West Virginia position. Now, Adam Schefter doesn't really do a whole lot of reporting on things of that nature. So that's why my red flags are up. That's why my alarms are going off. Okay, I'm automatically like, whoa, we're usually talking about potential injury situations, head coach in the NFL, offensive coordinator type deals in the NFL, not in the college landscape. What are we doing here? What is going on here? Does Schefter know something we don't? Why would he report on this? I feel like this is a big deal. So in that coaching race for that West Virginia head coaching position, there are a few other names in the bucket. Don't get me wrong. It's not like Rocco Becht's father, Anthony Becht, is the only name and the only interview that West Virginia has gone through. No. There are a few other names here. Jeff Monken of the Army head coach was interviewed. Rich Rodriguez, obviously, Rich Rod. West Virginia fans will know Rich Rod. And then Andy Kotelnicki. I'm going to murder that name, as we've seen this week. Not great with names. A lot of names going on right now. But the Penn State offensive coordinator. I've named 3 names on top of Anthony Becht. Let's break down all 4. Anthony Becht, reported per Adam Schefter to be in the mix. Got that interview. Okay. Then you look at Rich Rod. Definitely has obviously coached at West Virginia and a prime candidate for that position. The other 2 are where things get interesting because you're thinking, oh, 1 of 4. Why are we getting all up in arms about this? It's less than a coin flip chance here. Well, Anthony from Penn State tweeted out after there had been talks about this whole situation. He said, quote, "Beyond lucky to be a part of the Penn State football family. Still a lot to accomplish this season, and I am looking forward to what 2025 has in store for our program. Hashtag we are." I don't know if that's how he meant to tweet it, but that's just kind of the way I read it, considering the way that Penn State does their stuff. Then Jeff Monken from Army, do not mean to disrespect that area of situation. Was asked about the potential for a West Virginia head coaching position. And basically what he said was, well, of course they're going to interview me. I'm good. They're not going to interview losing head coaches. I'm sticking with the Army. Basically what he said in a paraphrasing sense there. So that really does now narrow it down to a flip of the coin. Very, very interesting. Rich Rod, obviously, with that history. This is, in the last couple minutes here, 8 minutes or so, have been talk about the coaching position at West Virginia. This is not a West Virginia podcast. I'm sure you're wondering, what are we even doing here talking about this? Bit ridiculous, if you ask me. And I don't necessarily hate that take. I agree. I'm not here to talk about the Mountaineers, but this is directly tied to the Cyclones. If in a universe, Anthony Becht heads out to Morgantown, what then happens to Rocco? Does he stay here? Does he follow his father? I've got some stats for the 2 quarterbacks up here. Garrett Green from West Virginia this past year and Rocco Becht. Garrett Green threw for 1,972 yards to Rocco's 3,235 yards. So Rocco outthrew him by approximately 1,300 yards. Rocco, 22 touchdowns to Garrett Green's 13. That's an extra 9 touchdowns. Rocco threw 9 interceptions to Garrett Green's 11. That's 2 less. And then if you look at the QBR, Rocco was 41st in the nation and Garrett Green was 44th. Now, some might say that this whole situation is really West Virginia trying to get Anthony onto the roster, onto the coaching staff in some capacity to bring Rocco on as their quarterback. I guess on staff. That's not the word I'm trying to use, but to bring him onto the team. I don't think that's the case. Honestly, when you look at these QBRs and when you consider the amazing receiving core that Iowa State had, that's where you can kind of draw some of these touchdowns and some of these yards from. I don't think it's about trying to get Rocco onto the team. Now the question is, if Anthony goes out there, does Rocco follow him? Unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that question. All I can do is hope that Rocco realizes kind of what he's built here and what's going on, what he has to offer to the Cyclones and how much the Cyclone fans love him and what he's done for this program, especially in the last year. and will decide to stay. And potentially, obviously West Virginia has the final say. Who's the head coach of the Mountaineers moving forward? But if Anthony is offered the position, maybe he takes a second look and decides what's best for him. He is currently the head coach of the St. Louis Battlehawks in the, I don't know if it's a USFL or UFL or what their official name is now. But either way, he's got a position. So a lot of things moving in that department. We'll certainly keep an eye on that. My current guess, I know it was reported per Pete Thamel that in the next 24 to 48 hours, we'll have a decision. My guess is they won't go with Anthony. They'll end up going with Rich Rod, and we won't have to debate this or think about it or worry about it anymore. But if it does come down to Anthony, my guess is Rocco will stay in Iowa in Iowa State, I guess specifically because of many factors, one of them being the CyHawk rivalry. The CyHawk rivalry, however, runs deeper than just football. Basketball is also played and many other sports, in there, but basketball will be played this week between the Iowa State Cyclones and the Iowa Hawkeyes in two fronts, one of which will be coming up right after this. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. We've been talking this week especially about Iowa State making a bowl game in the Pop-Tart Bowl against Miami and the Hurricanes. We've looked at the lines. Currently, Iowa State 1.5-point dogs to the Hurricanes. I don't know why. I don't know how. I don't know which way or what that's all about, but I do know this. I'm taking the Cyclones plus 1.5. You're going to give them points. I'm taking it. FanDuel right now, the app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your live bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Speaking of CyHawk rivalries, there are two that go down this week, obviously, between the Cyclones and the Hawkeyes. The better side of that being the Cyclones. You're here with Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you guys for listening to this point in the episode. Let's break it down. We got two games, men's basketball and women's basketball. I'm going to go ahead and start with the men's basketball side of things because Iowa State's ranked #3 in the nation. This matchup will be in Carver Hawkeye Arena. I don't know exactly what they call it, but Carver in Iowa City, let's put it that way. I don't want to get too in-depth with what's going on over there in the Hawkeye realm of things. Iowa State ranked #3. The Hawkeyes unranked at this time. This game will go down on Thursday, and I believe it will be 6:30 p.m. if I am not mistaken, and I may be. Okay, I've gotten things wrong in the past. There are a couple things to note from this matchup. Number one, the Cyclones will win by approximately 1 million points, give or take 3. I don't think it'll be close. I really don't. I've spoken to people close to the program. They believe Iowa. This is not these people are not affiliated with the program. They just are dedicated fans. And I don't necessarily love that I'm having these conversations, but I'm doing it for you guys. Okay. They believe that there's a potential the Hawkeyes end up being about a bubble team, about a 500 level team. And I sincerely believe that the Cyclones will, in fact, be a Final Four team this year. I think that they are unbelievably good. They've grown from last year, and they have gotten significantly better. Now, what does that mean for this game specifically? Well, when you look at the Hawkeyes tape, things don't look great, okay? I don't love the amount of lackluster defense being played. I think Iowa State can certainly capitalize on that. And one thing that I guess I'll say 2 points from watching the Hawkeyes play a few games. I really dove into their highlights, especially against Michigan, because, boy, it was a close game, but in the end, I don't think it was the same on the scoreboard as it was on the court, if that makes sense. Their transition defense, when not in a crunch time situation, and their drive defense, which is, I don't think the right term, but I'll explain in a second, are both quite horrendous, okay? And I don't necessarily think that they will be able to stop the Cyclones. I personally do, on a very serious note, think the Cyclones will win this game by a significant margin, okay? When I say the fast break defense. The fast break offense for the Hawkeyes is nothing to scoff at. Okay. They are obviously capable of scoring points. And that was my biggest takeaway from watching some of their tape was they want to score. They obviously want to put the bucket in the hoop. They're willing to drive and to shoot threes and to drive and kick and to run their little fancy plays and whatnot. They want to score more points. But when it comes to the defensive side of the ball, they look like they're taking naps out there at times. And I don't think Iowa State basketball operates in the same way at all. Okay. This game for today, I will be approaching from a bit of a macro level. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit and look at concepts more than anything. And tomorrow may be different. Thursday morning's episode, before the game, I'll dive in a little bit more as well. But Iowa State in transition is unbelievable. Those are going to be free points for the Cyclones. Anytime we can get a turnover or a fast, they score, boom, it's out of bounds, boom, it's inbounds. We're moving up the floor immediately. If we're pushing the pace, I believe in the Cyclones and their ability to score more points than the Hawkeyes. Okay, now the other one is the drive side of things. I think that the Hawkeyes will be basically unable to stop Keyshawn Gilbert. And I wouldn't be surprised if he pops off for about 47 points, realistically here. Tamin Lipsey might even end up with more than 13, and we've seen a couple of rough showings of him in the last few games. 1 point, I think he had maybe 5 points in their last game. I didn't look that up. I don't have it right in front of me. But honestly, I think that Iowa State squares up against this team very well. A lot of Iowa State's strengths are some of Iowa's weaknesses. This game means a lot to both teams. Don't get me wrong. And Milan Momcilovic was asked, what does this game mean to the Cyclones? What has coach told you guys? In answer to that question, he basically said, we have to win. And it's that simple. I think a lot of Cyclone fans feel the same way. We just have to win. And the teammates understand the message. Now, when asked, what do you tell some of your younger teammates about this rivalry? Milan basically said, I haven't played in Kinnick before. I've heard it's going to be a sellout. It's going to be loud. We gotta show up. We got to control our emotions and play our game. I love a lot of things here from that answer. Okay, I really do. Number one, the fact that he's like, I heard it's going to be a sellout. Iowa is like begging fans to buy these tickets. They're going to try to fill it up, but I don't think it's going to be like some sort of crazy atmosphere like it would be if it were in Hilton. Okay, Hilton Magic is a different level. They're on a different plane than whatever it is, Carver or the basketball arena over there in Iowa City. Secondly, he basically said, hey, I haven't played there yet, but I do know that it will be loud. Love that. He acknowledges the importance of the CyHawk rivalry. And then lastly, he said, hey, we have to control our emotions and play our best basketball. When asked about that, what does that look like? He basically said, hey, we can't be playing ISO ball. When things get hot in the kitchen, when smoke starts flaring up, we got to control the situation, realize what's going on, evaluate, and play our basketball. Things don't change when things get tough. Okay, and I love that about this team. I love that about Milan. They know this is a team game. They are here to, as a group, beat the opponent. Okay, it's not the Tamin Lipsey show or the Gilbert show or the Momcilovic show or the Jefferson show, even for that matter. The Cyclones are here as a team to defeat the Hawkeyes on Thursday. That is their main goal. Then they will move on to their match on Sunday. I love that from this team, and I think that in and of itself could be enough to get the Cyclones that win. But on a fundamental level, which I'll break down more tomorrow, I really like the Cyclones in this matchup. I think they attack all of Iowa's weaknesses quite well without necessarily devoting time to practicing how can we beat the Hawkeyes, which is basically the name of the game now. Cyclones, as you and I both know, it's now Cyclone State, right? But let's not get too crazy. If obviously Iowa State beat Iowa in football, that's a past event. That's a fact. And Iowa is going to fall to Iowa State in the basketball side of things on the men's side. Well, we need to go 3 for 3 and bring home the women's side as well. I'll be breaking down that game right after this. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite. And right now you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, score an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently delivered the world's best steaks experience. And the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchase may apply. Okay, we got to break this down. 2 basketball games in 1 week for the Cyclones that are of significant importance. Everybody knows how loud the program, how loud the fans get around the CyHawk football game. Okay, there's 2 sides to that: the Hawkeyes and the Cyclones. You're here with Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you guys for still being here for segment 3, where we are going to break down Iowa versus Iowa State women's basketball. Okay, we talked about the men's in portion 2 of this episode, but now it is time to transition towards the women. And this game is going to be cinema. I'm not going to lie. We're looking at a matchup between 18 and 21 as it currently stands, Iowa State being the higher seed there, number 18. And boy, obviously, Iowa has made some noise in the past. They have been very, very, I would even add an extra couple varies onto loud. Okay, Caitlin Clark, Kate Martin, you name it, multiple names for the Hawkeyes. Whoa, the Hawkeyes have been of national importance, and for good reason. Some of the best basketball players in women's basketball history, realistically. I'm not gonna hate on the players. It's a CyHawk rivalry for a reason, but I'm not gonna say Caitlin Clark's not good. Okay, I'm not gonna get ridiculous here. One of the best three-point shooters in the game. So that being said, now things have certainly changed. Caitlin Clark out, Kate Martin no longer with the program. So where do we sit right now? That is an interesting point, because the Cyclones haven't really changed a whole lot from last year, while the Hawkeyes are currently reeling from some of their biggest losses, obviously, in program history. Caitlin Clark not being there, there are a couple names that I want to say for the Hawkeyes for you guys to pay attention to. This is going down tonight. Cyclones, Hawkeyes this one I know will be sold out. Hawkeyes fans, get up for their women's basketball. Okay, that's a fact of the matter, and it's going to be loud in there. Okay, the Cyclones are going to have to perform. But first off, we got a 4-headed monster in the Hawkeyes. As I've said, I've been close with a few people that are big fans of the Hawkeyes. And these are some of the biggest names that they pointed out to me: Addison O'Grady, Lucy Olson, Sydney Fulter, and Hannah Stolke. Guard, forward. Big names, all upperclassmen for the Hawkeyes. I do have a couple freshmen I'll point out in a few minutes, but I'll say this: there's tape on these players out there, and I do think the Cyclones can shut them down. We've got the matchups at some of these positions. I believe in the Cyclones in that aspect. On the front of missing Caitlin Clark, we have noticed that Sydney Fulter is now 2 for 12 from deep, shooting the 3. She said it's not her best game. It's just not where I want to be. This is obviously not the best that I can play. I'm not a good 3-point shooter. I was a wrestler in high school. I might be able to shoot 2 for 12 on an average day. So I would kind of hope so, I guess. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I assume that they will perform better than that come this game. But I will say the Cyclones can expect potentially a bit of a who are we still from the Hawkeyes, right? This is a bit of a defining game for both teams. Obviously, the Hawkeyes having 1 loss to Tennessee, and then Iowa State having 2 losses to South Carolina and UNI, which is an in-state rivalry. So I'm not going to put too much weight in that, because in-state games always mean more. That being said, let's not get too in deep on the Hawkeyes. There are 2 last names that I want to mention: 2 freshmen, Tegan Malini and Taylor Stremlow. Keep an eye out for them. They could be pretty solid. They've obviously made their mark already if I'm talking about them. Now, the Iowa State Cyclones, on the other hand, we're going to be looking to capitalize and to make the most of this game, not only from a momentum standpoint from the CyHawk trophy and everything that surrounds this game, but also from the position of we need to kind of define who we are as well. We are, 7-2, and we need to kind of what are we going to do here this season? What are our expectations? Where can we reasonably put ourselves? I think this is a very good game for that mark. You put yourselves up against South Carolina, the best team in the nation, I would assume, other than maybe potentially UConn. And it's going to be tough to really make that mark, especially this early in the season. Like, where can you really put pen to paper and say, this is who we are in game, 5, whatever that was? That's going to be tough to do against the best team in the nation. This, I think, is a very reasonable position. Game 10 against a reasonably same level opponent. Obviously, 18 and 21, those numbers might shift a little bit, but they won't get too far off that mark. I think this is a great spot for the Cyclones. Now, 2 names, everybody knows them: Audie Crooks and Emily Ryan. Audie Crooks, in her last game, had 19 points in 22 minutes. That's going to be something that the Hawkeyes are going to have to find a way to stop. I've heard, through the grapevine, they have a plan to take a 3-headed approach with their big, their forwards, their posts, which have been playing well this year, to try to slow down Audie Crooks. But this team is not one-dimensional. Emily Ryan, outside of playing that perimeter, is 3, 6, and 12 in her last game. Those are pretty good numbers. I'm not going to lie. 12 points, 6 assists there. So the thing I like about the Cyclones this year is that they are a little bit more mature. They are certainly more in tune with who they are than they were last year. They've gained some experience after that tough loss to Stanford. They were, I guess, unsure necessarily last year compared to this year, but they certainly have found what can Audie do well, what can Audie Crooks do well, and how can we facilitate from outside with Emily Ryan. And when you look at some of these other names, Addison O'Grady, Lucy Olson, Sydney Folter, Hannah Stolke, I don't think Iowa State is scared of these names anymore. I do think that Caitlin Clark and Kate Martin and some of those other names from last year's team played a huge role in how other teams perceived the Hawkeyes, And I think now it almost, to me at least, feels like this is a level playing field. Iowa State is going to step on that court, and there is no longer the national top-tier media. Oh, Caitlin Clark's going to break this record this game. All kudos to her. I'm not mocking her. I'm just saying that can be a little bit intimidating for players stepping onto the court. Like, we're here to play basketball, and yet there's, a completely filled coliseum wherever you're playing, and everyone's eyes are on Caitlin Clark. Now, granted, I don't play women's basketball, believe it or not, so I don't know how they approach that game. I don't. But I have spoken with those inside the organization and their practice squad members that play against their players every day, and they've said this team is very good. We're better than we were last year. We have a stronger sense of identity, and we know what we can do well. This is a great defining game for the Cyclones to do just that and to move forward through this season before we get deep into conference play. And all these games are not that the CyHawk game or the Iowa State game doesn't matter, but of course, but it doesn't affect the Big 12 standings. It just doesn't. So this is a great time for the women to do just that, to find out who they are and to make the most of this huge opportunity. And of course, to bring home the hardware. That'll be Wednesday night. So let's get the ball rolling early, and then the men will bring it home on Thursday. I cannot wait. Thank you for making Locked On Cyclones your first listen every single day. We'll be back tomorrow. Until next time, Cyclone fans, sign up.